today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of her upcoming rematch with Heather Hardy, Amanda Serrano promises that the Katie Taylor rematch will happen, but that rematch is on unsteady ground.
Because Katie Taylor's supposed to be fighting Chantel Cameron for a second time in the fall, and, a rematch with Amanda, that would presumably go down some point next year.
Rematch was made. It was on schedule, but Amanda Serrano suffered an injury and Chantel Cameron stood in her place, and Chantel, she ended up beating Katie Taylor. Now what Amanda says is, I was out with friends in Puerto Rico, where she now lives, watching Spence versus Crawford, and all I heard was, when's the Katie Taylor rematch? She said on social media.
As stated, Amanda Serrano was on schedule, en route to fight Katie for the second time, but she suffered a hand injury and was unable to compete. Chantel Cameron stood in her place, and now it seems like Katie's focus, all her time and efforts, are going into beating Chantel in a rematch instead of Amanda.
Now the question is, can Katie Taylor beat Chantel Cameron in a rematch? A rematch that's supposed to be taking place at the same weight that the first fight did, up there at 140 pounds, which means Katie Taylor's status as undisputed champion at lightweight, her titles, they're not on the line in that fight. It's for Chantel's belts again.
Leaves the door open for the Serrano rematch if Katie's still champion at lightweight.
Amanda Serrano, who says, my team at Most Valuable Promotions will be working on that. We both have a fight scheduled, but I promise it will happen. What Puerto Rico asks, Puerto Rico gets.
Puerto Rican slugger and one of the best dressed fighters in the entire sport of women's boxing. Very classy, very flashy, Amanda Serrano.
In reference to the Cameron rematch, she didn't pull any punches. She said, I don't think it's a good fight. Our rematch is definitely off the table if Taylor loses again. She said then, I don't know what Katie's going to do after that. If she's going to retire or I don't know. I know my career is going to continue. And Amanda Serrano, being the undisputed featherweight champion, she has a host of mandatory challengers that would love to get a crack at her, and you could favor Amanda to win any one of those fights because she's a far more experienced fighter than those fighters are, and she's a far bigger puncher.
On the premise that Katie Taylor loses the Chantel Cameron rematch in the fall, and it's off the table, another major fight, another big fight that's out there for Amanda, if she wants it, is an Alicia Baumgardner fight.
Amanda Serrano took to her social media and stated, my fans want Katie, and so do I. I thought I edged it out, so it's personal. In the future, anything can happen, if the money is right. There's a few great fights for me, to which Alicia Baumgardner responded, I don't know, champ. They're saying otherwise. To which Amanda Serrano responded, they say many things, and where I'm at, this is what they want.
This is not the first time we've talked about a potential Baumgardner versus Amanda Serrano fight, though Amanda has been insistent that the only fight she's willing to leave her own division for is a Taylor rematch. She's not going to be fluctuating up and down in weight anymore.
If you know the story of young Amanda Serrano from Brooklyn, you'll know that she spent a number of years moving up and down in weight, fighting for titles when the opportunities weren't as plentiful and neither was the money. And now that she's making very good money, doing very well for herself, recently built a house in Puerto Rico and relocated there, she doesn't have to scratch and sniff.
She's not at anybody's mercy, matchroom or otherwise.
Alicia wants the fight with Amanda Serrano, and I've seen a good number of fans demanding the fight as well, because they're only separated by one weight class. Amanda's down there at 126 and Alicia's at 130, so it seems a sensible fight to make.
But Eddie's got to get the checkbook out, and he has to make it worth Amanda Serrano's while, because Amanda's doing very well for herself.
She's already undisputed champion at her own weight. She already has a good number of situations, a good number of fights right there that she can have. It's not necessary for her to keep fluctuating in weight anymore, so if Matchroom wants her time, Matchroom's got to pay.
Pay well.
The undisputed featherweight champion versus the undisputed super featherweight champion. Both fighters have their strengths. Alicia Baumgardner has her one-hitter quitter power and her athleticism, her sharpness, whereas Amanda has her cardio, her volume, and her work rate, her experiences. She is a more experienced fighter than Alicia Baumgardner. By and large, more rounds in the bank. It's an intriguing fight.
But the difference for Amanda now, previous years, is she is not strapped for cash and she is not at the mercy of anyone. She's got good management, good money behind her to where she doesn't have to bend and budge to accommodate anybody else. That's really the difference.
Which makes all the difference. She can have a Baumgardner fight, or she cannot have a Baumgardner fight. But if she doesn't, she won't be hurting for it.
She'll be all right.
I do think it's a great fight, and it could be the next great super fight in the sport of women's boxing, because we've already gotten Taylor versus Serrano and Shields versus Marshall
In the same calendar year.
So what's the next great super fight in the sport? Serrano versus Baumgardner could be that fight, but Baumgardner versus Pursoon, that could also be a super fight. We know what Delphine Pursoon is all about. By now we do. And she just so happens to be Alicia's mandatory challenger.
It's another good one.
A fight that will make people pay attention. A fight that will make people sit down and watch. Those are at least two suggestions for Alicia that I can think of, and we'll
see what shakes out.
see what happens, because before it becomes about Katie and Amanda again, Katie's got to get through Chantel. If she doesn't, then maybe we'll see what happens between Amanda and Alicia. We've got to wait. We have no choice. Men's welterweight news. Eddie Hearn says Conor Benn is ready to rip somebody's head off. We'd like for him to box in September, us already being in August, the first day of August.
That leaves them with very little time to find an opponent. That is, a high-profile opponent, somebody with a name and
some semblance of drawing power. The British Boxing Board of Control released a statement this past Monday where they hinted at the possibility of appealing the NADP's decision. Benn, who is currently without a license to box in the UK, would have to go through the BBBOC. He has an international license to box, but I would like him to box in the UK. If they, the BBBOC, appealed, that would slow down the process. A lot of people will be trying to convince them to appeal, Hearn told PA Sport.
they've been a thorn in Conor Benn's side throughout all of this, and I've said it before that there seems to be a rancor there for Conor that I haven't seen them have for other fighters, almost like it's personal.
That if they wish to continue stifling young Conroy's boxing career, they actually still have that option, that he's not completely out of the woods yet. According to Eddie, I don't expect them to, them being the BBBOC, to file that appeal, but if they do, we're here and ready. We've done it every day for a year. What's another month or so? Hopefully we can move forward. Everything that has been asked of Conor Benn, he's done. I just hope he's respected. At what point do you say it's been a year and a half since he's boxed? How are we going to move forward? The plan at the moment is for Benn to box on a date in September and then have a bigger fight in December. I would like him to box in September. He wants to go straight into a big fight, but he's been out of the ring for 16 months. Benn fighting in September and December will be great, but we'll see, Hearn said.
They want to get him out there 2 times this year to make up for lost time because he hasn't boxed in over a year.
That would be ideal. You have to assume that if they want to get him out there as soon as September, the first fight is going to be a gimme fight. The first fight is going to be a tune-up fight, and after 16 months of not fighting, he needs one. He needs a gimme fight.
He doesn't need a big name guy anyway, not his first fight after 16 months, because just him returning to action is the attraction, and you can expect his performance in that fight, whoever he's fighting, to get a lot of scrutiny.
To some people, Conor Benn's name is tainted for eternity. He is going to be considered a dirty fighter moving forward no matter what, because you can't rewrite history. You can't change the past, and in the minds of some, he's always going to be a dirty fighter. And to these people especially,
These guys,
they're going to be paying close attention to how Conor looks, how he performs. Now that he's been under the hot lights, is he going to look how he was looking up until this entire fiasco started? Because if he doesn't,
they'll say it was the pets.
over time, it did seem like Conor Benn's boxing improved. He started to get stronger, sharper, faster. His accuracy and some highlight reel knockouts, it seemed like Conor Benn was coming along. Now, given this fiasco, to a lot of people, they will attribute all of that to performance-enhancing drugs, unless he can stay in character upon his return. He can look like the guy he was looking like before we last saw him.
The last time we saw him.
He's ready to rip someone's head off, said Eddie Hearn. When you talk about how low he's been, there's some people who are like, he deserves it. Who cares? but what he's been through would break most men.
Since this whole thing started, Conor Benn has maintained his innocence.
It's not going to be enough. It's not going to convince some people. To some people, he will always be viewed as a dirty fighter. So you can expect his next couple of performances to receive a lot of scrutiny. And you can expect that if they do get him out in September, it's probably going to be against the journeyman, some ham and egg guy, a tune-up fight. And I've got nothing against that because he needs one. He hasn't boxed in over a year. High-profile names that are out there for Conor are names like Kell Brook.
Perhaps after his next fight at 154.
That too. At what weight will Conor Benn be returning? Is he going to return to welterweight, or will he campaign as a junior middle or a middle moving forward? But, Kell Brook is one high-profile name that's still out there for Conor Benn. Florian Marcoux.
He's not a high-profile guy.
Well, he's not as high-profile as Conor, but he does have a cult following of Albanian boxing fans. There's Kell Brook, Florian Marcoux, Josh Kelly, who was in action not that long ago. Now, that fight could put some asses in some seats in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, Conor Benn versus Josh Kelly would do well.
Same as Conor Benn versus the winner of Smith versus Eubank, too. That's another money fight that he can have.
Good number of these fights would have to be fought above welterweight, though. I don't know that Conor Benn is going to go back to boiling down to 147 after having been gone so long and so many other opportunities above welterweight.
Good number of these fights. They're lucrative fights, but they're fights that would have to take place above 147. Just in keeping with the theme of all things welterweight, unbeaten up-and-comer from Philadelphia, Jaron Boots Ennis was taking in this past weekend's fight, saying, "Give me the winner, please. I need them straps ASAP. Hashtag undisputed soon."
How would Jaron Ennis fare against today's Terence Crawford, who's clearly the older fighter, 35 years old?
9 years older than Jaron Ennis, but a far more seasoned, experienced fighter than Jaron Ennis, who's at the peak of his powers and the height of his popularity. How would Jaron Ennis perform compared to how Errol performed? Errol, who was supposed to be king shit at welterweight.
Terence just sees another dead body. That's how he described it.
Text message correspondence of Waylo, Philadelphia, public figure, and Terence Crawford has made its way to social media. Waylo stated, "You are a fucking monster, goddamn," to which Terence responded, "Appreciate it."
Waylo responded to that by saying, "You know that Boots is waiting."
Terence replied to that by saying, "Y'all trying to see another dead body?" Waylo stated, "He's ready."
No, he isn't.
He's just another souped-up Showtime fighter like Errol was a souped-up Showtime fighter that hasn't really been exposed yet. I like Jaron Boots Ennis, and I think he has a lot of potential, but if you put him in the ring with Terence Crawford in his very next fight,
Terence will ruin him.
he will ruin him. He will not be the same fighter that he has been up until this point. If you put him in the ring with Terence now, Terence will derail him.
Now, Waylo went right back to Jaron Ennis saying, "Bud is talking crazy," to which Jaron Ennis responded, "That's cause he's got plans on moving up to 54. He's acting for y'all. He's a walking victim. Stay at 147 so we can get active."
This last year and a half, these last 2 years, I think it's Jaron Ennis and his father, Bozy Ennis, that have been doing all the acting, pretending that they wanted a Terence Crawford fight when all this time they were lining themselves up for a belt that he didn't even have.
The IBF.
He only recently procured it this past weekend. If Crawford's who you wanted for over a year, if Crawford's who you wanted all this time, why weren't you fighting in WBO final eliminators? Why were you going the IBF route? He was an IBF champion.
We've already talked about that.
We've already talked about how Bozy Ennis, Jaron Ennis' father, kind of told on himself. He admitted that Black Prime reached out to them to do a fight with Terence Crawford, but he was insistent that Showtime be involved, even though he admitted they don't have a contract with Showtime.
We've already talked about that.
What about the fight? What do I think would happen in the fight? What makes me think that Terence Crawford here today at 35 years old is too much for Jaron Ennis, who's close to 10 years younger than he is? Well, I'll tell you this much.
What?
I actually think Jaron Ennis would be more competitive with Crawford than Errol was this past weekend, because Jaron Ennis, unlike Errol Spence, he's not busting at the seams to make welterweight. He's still comfortable making that weight.
So him being depleted is not an intangible. Him being weakened and leaving it all in the gym, it's not a factor with him the way it might have been a factor with Errol.
He's got good height, good reach, good wingspan for this weight, and for me and my money, a more layered approach to boxing, a more layered approach than what you see in Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. is a boxer-puncher that leans almost towards pressure fighting. I mean, they're both boxer-punchers. Jaron Ennis and Errol Spence Jr., but they do tend to lean in different directions. Where Errol Spence Jr. tends to lean towards the pressure fighting end of things, Jaron Ennis tends to lean towards the pure boxer.
Just a smidge.
He's not a pure boxer, don't confuse him with one, but he does tend to tilt in that direction a little more than pressure fighting and volume punching. Errol Spence Jr.'s approach as a boxer puncher is a lot more simple than what you get from Jaron Ennis, so I do think Jaron would be a slightly better challenge for Terrence than Errol was.
Still get knocked out, though.
He would not unravel as quickly as Errol Spence Jr. did. It would take Terrence a little while longer to break this guy down. Where he knocked out Errol in 9, I would say he knocks out Jaron Ennis in about 11, 12 rounds.
Yeah.
He'd respect his power because he would have power.
Errol didn't.
And he would be sharper opposite the ring Terrence Crawford than Errol Spence Jr. was, but he wouldn't be sharper than Terrence Crawford.
Be sharper than Errol, just not sharper than Terrence.
For 5 years, I told you that Errol Spence Jr. doesn't actually do anything better than Terrence Crawford in terms of nuts and bolts fundamentals, nuts and bolts boxing, the science and the sweet science. There's no area of the ring where Errol Spence Jr. was a better boxer than Terrence Crawford. His only out was that he was a little bit bigger and a little bit beefier than Terrence.
But not actually stronger.
Some of you out there adhered to my counsel when I told you that Terrence Crawford would destroy Errol Spence Jr. Some of you adhered to it, some of you didn't, for those of you that didn't, and are now turning to Jaron Boots Ennis as the next boogeyman, the next souped-up Showtime fighter that Terrence is supposed to be afraid of. I'm telling you now that if they were to fight next, Terrence would ruin him.
Oh, he'd knock him out. He'd definitely knock him out. You know why?
Jaron Ennis hasn't faced a really good puncher, a really strong puncher, a sharp one, an accurate one. He hasn't faced one yet. And you saw what a little bit of movement in the Karen Chukatsian fight did to his strength, his power.
Karen Chukatsian himself is not any kind of a puncher. He doesn't sit on his punches. He fights on the balls of his feet the entirety of a fight, but with a few shifts, pivoting off the jab,
pivoting off of Jaron Ennis's jab to create new angles and get out of harm's way. What if Karen Chukatsian had counterpunching? I mean, tack on counterpunching to those shifts and pivots.
From either the southpaw or orthodox stances, since Terrence Crawford is a switch hitter.
Tack on accuracy and sharpness.
Poise.
Oh, I could see Jaron Ennis trying to hit the gas on Terrence Crawford like he did with Karen Chukatsian, and I could see Terrence Crawford walking him into something. Walking him into something big.
Something bigger than he's ever had to absorb.
Jaron Ennis may have a more layered approach than Errol Spence Jr. does, but he would share the same fate as Errol. He'd get stopped.
It'd just take a little longer than it took to stop Errol.